History is full of amazing stories and memorable people.
But we don't care about them.
No hits, deep tracks only.
Some of the most influential people in the world have been completely overlooked or just plain forgotten.
We're digging deep into the history books to bring you their stories.
And maybe some laughs along the way.
This is History's B-Side. Today's B-Siders are the inventors of fast food.
Just this past weekend, Rita and I went to Akron, Ohio, really Cuyahoga Falls, but sort of the Akron area. And we stopped and had lunch at a restaurant called Swenson's. Have you ever heard of it or been there?
No, I haven't. Is it like a chain or is it a family restaurant?
Yeah, it's a regional chain, so it's not like huge, but it's, I guess, mostly in like the Northeast Ohio, but really like Cleveland, Akron, Canton area. And it's very, I guess, reminiscent of old style. I don't know when Swenson's was founded. That's obviously not the main topic of today's episode, but it's a car hop style restaurant.
Okay.
So you pull in the parking lot and you stay in your car the whole time. You flip on your headlights and one of their car hop boys comes sprinting out to your car to take your order. And they'll obviously run it back in and then bring the food out to you when it's ready. And then you sit in your car and eat. And just kind of the old-fashioned nostalgia aspect of Swenson's reminded me a lot of today's topic, which is going to focus around fast food, particularly old-style car hop type restaurants, things like that. Have you ever been to any place like that? I know like Sonic is, I guess, probably the main one that we...
I've been to a Sonic and then before they closed A&W, but I don't know that they ever did the car hop thing when I was around. Like they were just a place.
I think they did it. It just wasn't very like popular.
Yeah.
Or not very common anyway, because they had the indoor dining room, whereas like Swenson's and Sonic's don't. Are you a big fast food person? Like I know you eat pretty healthy.
I mean, this year, yeah. I've basically been eating trash for 12 months, but I mean, I don't know that I'd say I'm a big fast food person, but I would be content with any fast food. I'm not one of those people that would be like, ugh, how could you eat that trash? Even though I just called it trash twice.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I ever really crave fast food, but like I definitely eat it.
Yeah.
Probably more than I should, but
reading this made me crave McDonald's. Here's a question. Do you prefer McDonald's, Burger King, or Wendy's?
It depends what.
Okay.
I think
just burger and
overall,
fries.
I think Wendy's is probably the best of the three.
I agree.
I don't know. I've never like really been a big Burger King person. I know they've like revamped a lot, but it's just kind of like sort of always has that stigma of not being like the main place you would pick unless it's there.
Right.
I think Wendy's food is typically the best, but they're sometimes not very good either. And then McDonald's is just like, it's McDonald's. You know what you're getting. Yeah. It's never going to be good.
And they never have a working ice cream machine.
McFlurries. I remember that growing up was like, can we get a McFlurry? And it was never, ever working.
And it wasn't even location specific either. Every McDonald's, like we had a joke in our family because every time we would go to get a McFlurry or in March where they'd have the Shamrock Shake, we'd go there and the ice cream machine would be down. Even on vacation. We were like, do you guys have company-wide ice cream machines that are faulty?
I mean, I've seen the posts that are like, yeah, the ice cream machine's not really broken. It's just the employees don't want to clean it after, so they just tell you that it's broken.
That's rude, but I totally get it. Been there.
Yeah, I was going to say, we've both worked in the restaurant industry at least a little bit, and I wouldn't do that because I don't know, a sucker for customer service, annoyingly. But I've definitely considered that. Like, there were days working at Panera, and we were a half hour away from closing, and we're already like getting everything cleaned up, and someone comes in and orders a panini, and you just clean the grill, and you like have to turn it back on and
Yep.
make the sandwich and grill it and then clean it again because there's all kinds of melted cheese and crap all over it. The restaurant industry is definitely a unique kind of job. Like it's almost like a lifestyle job.
Oh, for sure.
Because you don't have normal hours and you don't work like a 8-hour shift and go home. Like you are there until they're not busy anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you have some experience with that too.
Yeah, I mean, working the most, I guess, restaurant-y job I had was working at Park Avenue in Portland. But it was different than the others. Like the other food jobs I'd had were like at coffee shops or cafes that like had a definite closing time. People weren't usually there the last hour we were open. And something I was like really uncomfortable with at first was the last call thing. 'Cause I like, in my heart, am like hospitality first. So it would I just didn't like telling people like, you gotta go. Which is obviously not how you would frame it, but I didn't even like doing last call until like I absolutely had to, like nothing left to do. So
at Panera, our policy was like we closed at 9:30 or whatever, but we weren't allowed to ask guests to leave. Mm-hmm. So while we were cleaning up and closing and stuff, like we could obviously stop serving at 9:30 or whatever, but we couldn't ask anyone to leave. And I'm going to tell this story because I don't know the people, so it's not like revealing anyone's identity, and it'd be really sad if they were randomly listening to our podcast. But there was one day that we were closing and entire restaurant's empty except for this couple that's sitting at a booth in the back of the restaurant. And like we're cleaned up, we're pretty much done. It takes us, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes to clean up and be ready to go.
Yeah.
And I'm the closing manager, so I'm finished my stuff, and I go around and I'm checking all the employees, making sure they're all done. And all the employees are done. They're just kind of standing by the registers where you clock out, waiting for me to check them and tell them that they're good to go. And as I'm walking around the dining room, I see that this couple's still there. And I was like, okay, keep checking. Everything's good. We're ready to clock out. But I'm like, they need to leave. Like, we're not supposed to ask them to leave, but like,
yeah,
we're done.
Yeah,
like, we're ready to go.
Staying on, waste
so
time on the clock.
I like slowly walk back to the back of the restaurant, and I could pick up bits and pieces of their conversations, and they're in the middle of breaking up. It was just so awkward because I was like, what do I do? Like, I can't interrupt this conversation, but also like, we can't just sit here while you two deal with this. So I was like, hey, sorry, we're heading out, so you guys gotta go.
Go cry in the parking lot.
I felt terrible, but also like, come on.
Yeah.
Clearly we're done. We're leaving here. So hopefully they work things out.
Or not. Maybe they broke up and found really great people.
Maybe, yeah. Either way, let's hope that they are either not listening to this podcast or they are and continue to after that. So getting back to our topic today, let's talk a little bit about the fast food industry in America. Obviously, we are the biggest country in the world for the food industry. We love to eat in America, probably a little bit too much. But the fast food industry is obviously enormous globally. Like, you see a ton of American brands worldwide, but you see some other international brands that are popping up in other countries and stuff too. And it's not like fast food wasn't invented in America. I know we're calling these the inventors of fast food, but just the concept of like cheaply made food, I guess low quality, cheaply made food that can be mass produced is what we consider fast food. But the idea of the actual speed behind it was a fairly new concept at the time of today's episode. But the industry in America, it's enormous. Like we account for over half of the global fast food industry in our country. Like in America alone, it's a $200 billion industry. And there's over 200,000 fast food restaurants, and it's estimated that 50 million Americans will be eating at a fast food restaurant on any given day. We love our fast food. It's quick, it's easy, it's cheap, and you're in and out, which it's really not that cheap anymore. We're just going to pick a bone about this. Like, I mean, fast food's getting kind of expensive.
You can kind of, I mean, I used to get so flabbergasted at when I worked at Press, because like the sandwiches and the breakfast, people would complain about the price, but it was like $6 for a sandwich or $7 for a sandwich. And I'm like, this is the same price of a Big Mac. Like, yeah, they're definitely not cheap anymore.
I get that at a full service restaurant too, and it's like people complain that I don't know, if we do a special event thing and it's like a $3 burger, and they're like, why is it $3? Like, go to Wendy's, it's right next door, and you're gonna pay $8 for the same burger. Anyway, within the fast food industry, we have what we call QSR, quick service restaurants, and that industry segment itself includes fast food restaurants and fast casual, like the Paneras, Chipotles, those types of still sort of fast, quick, inexpensive food, but a little bit better quality, little presented as fresher and not necessarily pre-made assembly line food.
Right.
So it's really not fast food, but fast casual is the second industry. But QSR includes both of those, and QSR in total accounts for more than 50% of all restaurant revenue in America.
Wow.
And within that segment, hamburger restaurants, like you're talking about McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, they make up more than 30% of all QSR market share.
Huh, that's higher than I thought it would be for some reason.
Yeah, like you'd think pizza would be up there, and they are number 2, but still burger joints are double pizza restaurants. Sandwich shops like Subway and Jimmy John's and whatever else, 12%. Chicken, Mexican, getting down a little bit lower. Yes, Mexican does include Taco Bell, America's favorite Mexican restaurant. But the idea of fast food really does stem from these car hop style restaurants. The idea of parking your car, talking into a speaker, or having an actual car hop come out to you to take your order from your window. Never getting out of your car, sitting in there enjoying your meal from the comfort of your own vehicle, either by yourself or with your family. And some of the early ones in that industry were the A&Ws, or like the White Castles. They've obviously kind of shifted their business models over the years.
Right. Why do you think that is? Like, people just don't want to eat in their car anymore?
I mean, I would say the biggest change to that is the invention of the drive-through.
That's fair.
Because people can still just sit in their car and eat if they want, but they could also just get going and get on the road. These restaurants didn't have drive-throughs, so even if you were getting a meal to go, you'd have to pull into the car hop and
well, I mean, and you
have
still
your meal
get
served
like
to you that way.
I don't know if this happens in other cities or towns, but like the Dunkin' near the high school is like a corral spot for guys with pickup trucks, and they all like sit in the parking lot and hang out all night long. And that's like kind of the vibe I get.
It was Taco Bell before it was Dunkin', and then the police came.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the vibe I feel like these places would have, where it was like a social.
Yeah, it really was, and it would be mostly families or young teens and early 20s, males as the customers who would flirt with all the car hop girls that were coming out and waiting on them. It was also aligned sort of with the growth of the American auto industry. So you'd have these big family cars that you could put the whole family into, and it was just part of like the experience of being in your car and being with your family, versus the fact that dining rooms weren't really a thing unless it was a special occasion sit down restaurant. It just wasn't just a culture shift between then the early 1900s, 1920s and today.
Right.
So today we are going to focus a lot on everyone's favorite, most notable fast food restaurant chain, McDonald's.
I'm loving it. Bow.
And one of the curious things about McDonald's, and I never thought of it until I was in college and doing a paper for one of my business classes about the history of McDonald's and their operations and things like that, that a lot of people probably don't know where the McDonald's in McDonald's comes from.
Yeah.
Because it really, if you look at the company history, it wasn't founded by anyone named McDonald. McDonald's, the company, credits as its founder a man named Ray Kroc.
Mm-hmm.
Ray Kroc was a very savvy, entrepreneurial-minded person, but he didn't found McDonald's.
But they cite him as the founder.
He kind of stole it. Yeah.
He kind of stole it.
It's funny because even if you look at McDonald's website and look at their history, they hardly even mention the person who really founded McDonald's and where the name comes from.
Yeah.
I pulled this quote directly from the McDonald's website. It says, "This is the history of McDonald's and its founding. In 1917, 15-year-old Ray Kroc lied about his age to join the Red Cross as an ambulance driver, but the war ended before he completed his training. He then worked as a piano player, a paper cup salesman, and a multi-mixer salesman. In 1954, he visited a restaurant in San Bernardino, California that had purchased several multi-mixers. There, he found a small but successful restaurant run by brothers Dick and Mac McDonald, and was stunned by the effectiveness of their operation. The McDonald's brothers produced a limited menu concentrating on just a few items, burgers, fries, and beverages, which allowed them to focus on quality and quick service. They were looking for a new franchising agent, and Kroc saw an opportunity. In 1955, he founded McDonald's System, Inc., a predecessor of the McDonald's Corporation, and 6 years later, he bought the exclusive rights to the McDonald's name and operating system." That's the entire mention of the McDonald brothers in the history of McDonald's.
One line. 2 lines, I guess.
Barely even mentions their names.
What was this operating system? Was this like was it like a point of sale? Or was it like
It was how they designed their kitchen to work, how they produced their food.
So it was like a
quickly.
Workflow system.
Yeah, and it was a new way of serving their customers. And that's really what today's episode is going to be about.
Gotcha.
It's not so much that we're not talking about the McDonald brothers because they had the founding of McDonald's stolen from them, which in itself is worthy of them being kind of in our theme of forgotten and overlooked people.
Yeah.
But their name is on buildings in every city in America, so they're really not necessarily overlooked people, except that they are within the company that they founded. But it's their system. The fact that they created this new way for restaurants to be operated is what makes them so novel and notable.
Yeah.
Like that's why we're calling them the inventors of fast food, because fast food as we know it would just be the inexpensive, low quality food that you could get wherever, but the speed at which that they produce their food and serve their customers is what reinvented fast food.
Gotcha.
And this entire segment that we now know and love and try to avoid eating.
It is really hard. Like, I know they introduce like healthy options, quote unquote, but I don't like when I go to a fast food place, it's so hard. Like, because even the salads are like covered in cheese and like some dressing that I was reading to try to find your trivia question. I read that like McDonald's Caesar dressing is more fattening than their hamburger.
Yeah. Well, now that you have calories on every menu, like you can see the calories include the dressings, and the salads have more calories than anything else.
Right.
And so this doesn't have anything to do with the episode, but I read somewhere that Taco Bell is like the quote unquote healthiest fast food.
I can almost see that.
Just something to do with the fact that they cut out like 30% of the salt in their menu items, and with the exception of like the Dorito taco shell, everything in their menu doesn't include like artificial ingredients or something like that. But the Dorito shell has to, because it's made with Doritos, which has artificial ingredients in it. So, I mean, I'm not here to say like go eat Taco Bell, it's healthy, but I guess it's a little bit better than some other fast food options.
Well, I mean, I think you can definitely find more reasonable calorie counts there. Because, like, I mean, we don't need to get into a giant nutrition conversation, but, like, if you're trying to...
That's what people come here for.
If you're trying to, like, diet to lose weight and you're a moderate-sized person, you're looking at, like, I don't know, 1,800 to 2,200 calories maintenance per day if you're trying to lose weight. And, like, you eat McDonald's with the fry and the Coke, you're at like 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 calories. That's half your... Nobody would go up to you and be like, well, for half of our day's food, we're going to have a hamburger and fries and then something else. Like, so it's almost impossible to eat there and have a balanced diet because it destroys your whole day.
Well, it's important to remember that during the time period of today's episode, which was really like the 40s, 50s, early 60s, there wasn't as much awareness about calorie counting and proper diets. So that's really what caused McDonald's and the fast food industry to explode. Yeah. So we're not worrying about what we're eating in this episode. We're just
Yeah.
talking about their operating.
I feel like they didn't give you buckets of pop and a giant box of fries either.
Oh, no.
Back then.
Yeah. Like a single small burger.
Right. And a
A
normal
little bit
amount
of fries.
right?
And a Coke. All right, so we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll get into the story behind Maurice and Richard McDonald.
We'll be right back.
Matt, you like coffee, right?
I love coffee.
Would you ever want to buy me a coffee?
Anytime, Phil. Just say the word.
You know, our dedicated listeners could also buy me a coffee.
Could they buy me a coffee as well?
They could buy you a coffee.
This sounds fantastic.
We set up this service called Buy Me a Coffee at buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside.
And people can buy us a coffee?
Yeah, it's really just a way for people to support the show if they enjoy the show. And if they're listening to the show, we sure hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, otherwise you're just, wasting your time.
At buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside, there's 3 ways that our listeners can interact with the show. Number 1, you can just donate to the show by clicking Buy Them a Coffee.
2, you can join as a member for $10 a month or $100 a year. Being a member gains you some pretty cool perks. You get access to our monthly bonus episode, History's B-Side Battles, access to our future episode queue, a name shout out on a future episode. We'll also send you a handwritten thank you postcard and sticker set, and more perks will be announced as we continue on.
There's also some different extras that people can get on our Buy Me a Coffee website. Things like choosing the topic for a future episode. If there's a lesser known person in history that you have an interest in, let us know and we'll do an episode all about them. You can also buy sets of custom postcards, sticker sets, and future merchandise that we add on there as well. Or you can draft your own advertisement script and we will promote whatever you want in a segment like this.
The website again is buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside.
Matt,
Yeah.
you owe me a coffee.
Oh. Do I get a coffee too?
You're buying.
All right.
So today we're talking about the McDonald's brothers, the brothers who co-founded the McDonald's restaurant, which grew into what we know and love today as America's favorite fast food. So today you get 2 B-siders in the episode because they really were together throughout their careers.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a lot of individual information on each. So they're going to kind of operate together throughout the process of this episode.
It's like the filet of fish sandwich. Buy one, get one free.
It's a double cheeseburger.
Oh my God.
Neither of those were on their menu, by the way.
Really? Oh, you mean back then? I was like, I swear to God, filet of fish is McDonald's.
Yeah. The McDonald's brothers are named Maurice or Mac and Richard or Dick. So throughout the episode, they'll be Dick and Mac McDonald. Maurice was born on November 26, 1902. Richard was born on February 16th, 1909. Interestingly, and this has nothing to do with the episode, but I just thought it was weird, they both have the middle name James.
That's what's up. Every good person does.
What's your middle name, Matt?
James.
They had 3 sisters. They were born in Manchester, New Hampshire, to poor Irish immigrants. Their names were listed as Patrick J., which I can only assume was James, and Margaret McDonald.
So, but you don't know where James comes from,
No, it's got to just be an Irish name, right?
Yeah, like a grandfather, great grandfather, or something like that.
Yeah, it's really not important to the episode. I just thought it was funny that they gave both their sons the same middle name. This isn't even like one of our other episodes where we say, yeah, people died a lot in infancy, and they just named the subsequent kids the same names as the first ones that died.
Oh my God.
They both survived and just had the same middle name.
Did people really do that? I don't remember talking about this.
Yeah, that's all throughout history.
Oh my God, that's terrible. What?
Obviously older than the early 1900s. This is way back. But
where'd I get my name,
yeah,
Mom?
that was a common practice.
Well, your dead older sister was named Pam, But after she died, you came along, and then we just recycled the name because we needed another Pam.
Yes, the classic 10th century name, Pam. Their father, Patrick J. McDonald, worked as a shift manager at the G.P. Kraft shoe factory for 42 years. Until, at least, he got laid off for being, quote-unquote, too old to continue doing his job. This clearly was before ageism
labor
lawsuits
laws
and
yeah.
HR departments.
The hell?
So he was left with no pension, and he was facing unemployment for the first time at this old age. The brothers recognized the situation that their father was in and saw really no viable financial future in Manchester. Mm-hmm. So it motivated them to themselves be financially independent. They set a goal for themselves that they wanted to be millionaires by the time they turned 50. They decided to accomplish this goal by moving out to Hollywood, all the way across the country, where they got jobs with Columbia Movie Studios as set movers and handymen, and they were making about $25 a week, which in today's dollars is about $20,000 a year.
Jeez.
So it's not very much. I mean, it's a salary. I can imagine cost of living is not as expensive then as it is now, but still not really like on your way to being a millionaire even really a ton of financial independence. But they hope to, while working for Columbia, climb the ladder to become movie producers or directors themselves. They wanted to be in Hollywood for Hollywood. Not really seeing that future pan out, they did pool their money, they saved up, and they bought a small theater just outside of LA. They renovated it, they installed a snack bar, and they renamed it The Beacon. Unfortunately for them, from what I've read, their operations were fine, and they had a really good idea. They just had really bad timing with when they opened their business. They opened their theater in 1930, right as America was in the early years of the Great Depression.
It's kind of wild. Like, why would you choose to do that? Like, they already knew the Great Depression was happening by then. It's not like it was a surprise.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it might be that they were able to get the theater for cheap because of the Great Depression, and maybe thought it wouldn't last as long as it did. Mm-hmm. I don't know. But either way, they obviously weren't able to really maintain their business during the Great Depression. They were constantly behind on their bills, and they ended up selling the theater in 1937. Now, the next part of their story is kind of debated even between articles of their journey. Some articles say that their father moved out to California with them and opened a small hot dog shop in Monrovia, California. Other articles I read would say that it was the McDonald brothers themselves who opened this first hot dog shop. But either way, this is how they get into the food industry. They recognize that even during the Great Depression, it seemed like the only profitable business in town was this small hot dog stand because people had to eat. Yeah. So they kind of copied the concept and opened their own hot dog stand and called it the Airdrome. It was located near an airport. That's why it gets the name. Okay. And they were able to get a lot of business from travelers in and out of Southern California. So at this hot dog shop, they sold, obviously, hot dogs, but they also sold 10-cent hamburgers and all-you-can-drink orange juice for 5 cents.
I would be so down for this all-you-can-drink orange juice. I don't know why. I really like orange juice. It's like for me, like the most refreshing beverage. I could definitely...
I think it's a great idea for a breakfast joint or a brunch joint. Bottomless mimosas sans champagne. But I don't know if I would want all-you-can-drink orange juice with
a hamburger,
burger, or hot dog. The brothers decided to move their business to San Bernardino, California. It was a growing business center with lots of families and travelers. And there's a funny anecdote that talks about the fact that they didn't have a lot of money still. Mm-hmm. So rather than buying a building in San Bernardino to restart their business there, they actually picked up the building that they had, put it on a truck, and drove it to San Bernardino. So they planted their business down there and opened a new restaurant, which they called McDonald's Barbecue. And the business was successful. They were making around $40,000 a year, which is a little under $500,000 today.
Dang.
The business was operated car hop style, like we said, was popular at the time. They had young female car hops, and they actually recycled their uniforms that they made from the uniforms from the Beacon Theater.
Gotta use them.
Their menu featured 25 items, a lot of different things that were barbecue related.
Interesting.
But they recognized that they had two main customer groups: young males who like to flirt with all the car hop girls, and working class families who are looking for a cheap meal.
Do you know why they chose to go barbecue? Like from doing hot dogs, hamburgers to barbecue? Like,
I don't know. I mean, I guess it's just maybe what they wanted to cook.
That's fair.
I think that's what a lot of people do at the restaurants. It probably was very easy for them to produce with the equipment that they had.
Yeah.
But they took a look at their menu and recognized that with all these different options, it wasn't the barbecue that was selling. It was their burgers.
Interesting.
The burgers were a lot faster to assemble, and the griddles that they cooked them on were easier to clean than the grills they needed for the rest of the barbecue menu. They also recognized that using car hops for their service was causing it to be really slow and unreliable, because the car hops themselves, the girls were spending more time socializing with the customers, flirting with the guys or whatever, because they knew it helped increase their tips. There was also more overhead with just payroll and needing to worry about keeping the food hot and getting the orders right. And it just wasn't their ideal way to run a business. They were looking for a better solution. Not to mention the fact that they felt that by eliminating the car hop girls, they could cater more to the families or just the working class people looking for a cheap meal, rather than these hooligans or young males who really weren't there to help their business as much as just kind of hang out and take up space. And they recognized, because the burgers were such a big part of their menu, they had a lot of wasted space in their kitchen and trying to store all this food and prepare all this food that wasn't selling well. They wanted to focus on what they could sell and what they could sell in quantity. And the biggest thing in total was the speed of the process. The car hop girls were slow, and quick service means more customers in and out of the building, which means more sales and more money.
Right.
These guys were very smart. They recognized a lot of the operational issues of their restaurant and were looking for ways to fix them to make them more profitable. So as any successful business does, they closed down. They closed their business for about 2 months to completely redesign their kitchen and change their menu and just rework their entire process.
Wow.
When they reopened, they had a limited menu. They only sold hamburgers, cheeseburgers, potato chips, coffee, soft drinks, and apple pie.
Gotta have the apple pie.
They also opened up as a self-service restaurant. They got rid of the car hops. Patrons had to get out of their cars and walk up to a service window. There was no dining area because the parking lot could then be bigger to accommodate more cars.
Did this change initially upset customers who, enjoyed the, social value of the car hop style service?
Yes, very much so. It was confusing for the customers at first, and we'll get into that in a little bit. The biggest part of their redesign, though, was their kitchen. It was designed to operate like an assembly line, maximizing the output. Burgers were pre-cooked and kept warm, so the food was ready almost as soon as it was ordered. They wanted to have a burger cooked and a meal prepared 30 seconds after it was ordered.
So were they going straight from uncooked burgers to ready in 30 seconds? Or did they cook them ahead of time?
So I think their old style would have been basically cooked to order.
Yeah.
That's kind of why even quote unquote fast food at the time really wasn't that fast. It was not common to pre-cook and hold hot your food.
Yeah.
So they were really the first ones to start
To do that.
prepping food ahead of time, cook and prepare it to then have it ready as soon as it was ordered, which we hear that now and we think that's gross. I don't want my food sitting underneath a heat lamp. But at the time it was a really new idea, and that's kind of what led to their success of having this fast service. Their new restaurant design, they reopened with just the name McDonald's, eliminating the barbecue aspect to it. And they called their new restaurant operation model the Speedy Service System. Speed being the key part of that.
Speedy.
Dick McDonald was quoted as saying, "Our whole concept was based on speed, lower prices, and volume. A guy comes in, you ask him what he wants on his burgers, and he says, I got to go back to the car and ask my wife. That wouldn't work."
So did they not allow customizations on that?
I don't know. I mean, I would think not, but I don't know. Here it's a restaurant. Their recipe was basically 2 pickles, squirt of ketchup, squirt of mustard, pinch of onions, wrapped up, good to go.
Gotcha.
And like you said, their new business model, once they opened, initially flopped. Customers did not understand the concept of having to get out of their car and come order food. They pulled in the parking lot and they'd be waiting for a car hop girl to come out and wait on them.
Oh my God.
And
That's
when
awesome.
no one ever came,
And not
they
awesome
just
for
pulled
them.
right back out of the parking lot and left,
People just sit there waiting for the car hop to come out.
probably honking their horns. The brothers got really nervous about the fact that people weren't coming to their new restaurant or weren't figuring out how to order. So they would have their employees park out front of the restaurant to stage the appearance of them being a busy restaurant.
Interesting.
So other people would be like,
That's a
oh, I
good
need
idea.
to come check that out.
Yeah.
It took a few months, but eventually this new concept caught on, and it was really led by the working class people, taxi drivers or construction workers who just needed to come get a quick, cheap meal and get back to work. So once people started to understand how the system worked, it caught on quickly, and they became the most popular restaurant in town. They had lines around the building, around the block, because people knew that they could just walk right up and get a meal and be on their way.
Yeah.
They sold their burgers for 15 cents, which was half the price of what you could get at a standard diner at the time. Again, appealing to that cheap meal.
Yeah. Do you know what 15 cents would be equal to today?
I think it's about $1.60 some.
That'd still be
So-
great.
Yeah, like I think if you went to McDonald's right now and ordered just a cheeseburger, it would probably be, I don't know, $1.60,
Yeah.
probably around that. So, I mean, it's either on par or maybe even a better deal
Right.
then than it is today. But the important thing was that the food was ready immediately. As their business grew, they began to make only minor changes. They replaced the potato chips with their, of course, famous French fries, and they replaced the pies with milkshakes. Milkshakes, which would later lead to the undoing of the McDonald's brothers, but we'll get into that.
The multi-mixers.
This restaurant began pulling revenues of around $100,000, which in today's money would be close to $1 million a year.
Jeez.
In 1952, the brothers again wanted to remodel their restaurant to achieve 2 purposes. Number 1, an eye-catching appearance, and, of course, even more efficiency. They hired an architect named Stanley Clark Meston to design a new building for them. He went with the famous red and white ceramic tile, and on the idea of Dick McDonald, 2 25-foot yellow stainless steel arches, one on each side of the building. The architect himself was very opposed to the idea of the arches. He thought they were ugly and didn't want people to know that he was involved with the project. But it ended up being the most iconic part of the McDonald's brand today.
Yeah.
The arches were on either side of the building, but the idea was that, number 1, they were eye-catching, would draw attention to the building. But the idea was that if you saw the building from a distance and at an angle, they would form the M shape that we see with the golden arches today.
Interesting.
The building also featured a third arch right next to the road that had their sign topped by a chubby chef cartoon nicknamed Speedy, who was named after their service model. And on the sign, they had a scroll boasting the number of burgers sold, which was another one of Dick's marketing ideas. While the architect was designing their building, the brothers redesigned their kitchen process again to maximize efficiency. And this is a really fun story. There was a movie made in 2016 called The Founder, which is really all about Ray Kroc, the man who's credited as being the founder of McDonald's.
Yeah.
But in the movie, when he meets the McDonald brothers, they tell him all about their business model. And they show this scene where their way of reworking their kitchen structure was to draw the entire layout of their kitchen to scale in chalk on a tennis court. They drew a big map of their kitchen in chalk, including all the equipment, everything to the correct size. And then they brought their staff to the tennis court and had them sort of simulate their cooking process while the brothers walked around and critiqued what they were doing, making sure they were following steps the right way, as if they were cooking actual burgers on imaginary equipment. and running around the kitchen.
What do you think this would look like from like a spectator who didn't know what they were doing? Just a bunch of people walking around on a tennis court pretending to cook.
I mean, it looks... I don't think you would recognize that they were pretending to cook. Like, it would look ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because you're just watching people kind of just waving their arms around in the air. But what makes it even better is the idea of these two brothers, like, walking laps around the tennis court, being like, no, do this! Go over here, make that faster! You're not doing that right! Did you skip the pickles on that?
It's like, what sport is that?
I don't know exactly how accurate the movie portrayal of it was. I've read in some of these articles that the movie was fairly accurate to the story of how things worked, obviously with little bits of dramatization, but
yeah.
in the movie scene of this, 2 or 3 times they make the entire staff stop, get off the tennis court so that they can erase parts of the kitchen and redraw it with equipment in different places. Because their idea was to find the bottleneck or the parts where the efficiency just broke down to solve those issues, and then test them out again and see how quickly they can make the staff work and get things done the right way so that their food could be ready almost immediately.
Yeah.
As soon as it was ordered and it was ready to go. Once they had their system worked out in chalk on the tennis court, they brought in the architect to design their kitchen custom made the way that they wanted it to look. They also planned the idea for dining rooms in some restaurants that they hoped to franchise that would also promote quick table turns, getting customers in and out so they could serve more faster. Some of their ideas for these dining rooms, which we would hate today, they removed heat so that the guests wouldn't be comfortable and want to stay too long. God. They also used angled seats that would sort of prop people up over top of their food so that you're hunched over your food and eat it faster that way.
Jesus.
And they used cone-shaped cups with the McDonald's logo on them that would force the customers to hold the cup the entire time that they were eating.
Oh my God, that's
so that
terrible.
You're actually consuming it faster. The seats were also spread out to discourage socialization, which when I read this, do you remember the old style McDonald's that would have the seats like bolted to the floor?
Yeah.
You would be on like a podium that maybe swiveled, but like you couldn't move tables or chairs or anything.
Right.
I don't know if that was accomplishing the same purpose, but that was their idea, was to keep people from sitting around and talking and get them to eat and get on their way.
They were really smart. It's kind of diabolical and mean, but I'm honestly surprised Starbucks hasn't adopted those techniques.
I don't know. I mean, Starbucks, you kind of like...
I get that, but it doesn't help them.
Socialize.
Like, it's just people taking up space.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's our thing, working in a full-service restaurant right now. Like, we know that we can get customers in and out in 45 minutes or less. Like, that's the traditional time for people to sit and socialize. But if you can get them out quicker, you can get new customers in quicker. And then you have, like, events and stuff that keep people in their seats, and you can't turn tables, and you don't make money that way. Their techniques must have been effective because some of their competitors, like Burger King and White Castle and some of these other restaurants that were in the same sort of industry category, started to adopt a lot of their quick service models and also their dining room techniques to get customers in and out, seeing the success that the McDonald brothers were having. In 1953, the brothers finally decided to begin franchising. And their original idea was not to franchise the McDonald's brand or the McDonald's name. They were franchising their system, their kitchen system, the speedy service system.
Do trainings, or would they just sell them like the design of the kitchen and the flow?
I would imagine it was both. It would be kind of like, we will help you get your restaurant set up and fix your operational techniques, but you don't need to call yourselves McDonald's. Like, we'll sell you this program that we've designed, but it doesn't have to be McDonald's. It doesn't necessarily have to be just burgers and fries. But they did eventually begin to franchise the McDonald's brand instead. They opened their first franchise, or their second McDonald's location, in Phoenix, Arizona, and their third one was in Downey, California. The Downey, California is today the oldest remaining McDonald's.
Oh, wow.
And kind of uniquely, they never really had to... Well, they never actually did update this Downey location to the present-day McDonald's brand standards, because the franchise was sold by the McDonald's brothers and not McDonald's Corporation, which is later set up by Ray Kroc. So they had this deal in place before Kroc was ever involved, and this company never really had to conform to what we see as modern day McDonald's.
Do you have any like examples of these brand standards that they didn't have to follow? Is it like the design of the building, the menu, or all of it?
Sort of all of it. I mean, so a lot of the menu items that we know today, like the Big Mac, the Filet-O-Fish, things like that, those never existed in the original McDonald's, the McDonald Brothers restaurant. So this franchise always kept the original McDonald Brothers menu items. They didn't have to update the buildings. It was still the same style building, I think it's pronounced Googie architectural style with the golden arches on either side. They never had a drive-through. And ultimately, kind of sadly, the restaurant did eventually close and go out of business because once corporate McDonald's started spreading across the country, they opened a restaurant right across the street from it and sort of drove it out of business. But when they tried to demolish the building, it was basically saved by historical preservationists who saw the significance of it being the oldest existing McDonald's. So McDonald's Corp ended up buying it and modernizing it in a way. It still has some of the original design and stuff, but I think it does have more of the actual menu. I'm not totally sure all the details on it, but it's been modernized a little bit and is now a part of corporate McDonald's.
They will take you.
The brothers did expand their business to, there's some differing opinions, but it's believed they had about 20 locations before Ray Kroc ever got involved into the company. So they did franchise a little bit. They always had the goal of keeping the company small, at least the McDonald's brand small. They definitely set a new system, a new way to operate, but just the idea of McDonald's being something that they were responsible for, they never really wanted to grow it more than a few locations in the Southwest. So now we'll talk about where Ray Kroc comes into the story.
Ray Kroc. I don't like Ray Kroc.
We heard a little bit of his background story in the first half of this episode from what came from the McDonald's website. And he really was this entrepreneurial-minded guy, but he was a struggling salesman. While I was researching this, I thought a lot about our Lizzie Maggi episode.
Yeah. I think you mentioned the McDonald's founders.
That's probably where I decided to do this episode. But I thought a lot about that episode because it's not really the same story. Like Charles Darrow didn't necessarily steal the Monopoly game from Lizzie Maggi.
Right.
But it was a struggling salesman who struck gold with this idea that maybe wasn't his idea.
Yeah.
So Ray Kroc was basically a door-to-door or business-to-business salesman of these multi-mixers, which were milkshake mixers that could make 5 milkshakes at once instead of a single one. So he would try to sell them to these restaurants on the idea that it would increase their sales because they'd be able to make and sell more milkshakes more quickly. And in this process, he found out about the McDonald's restaurant that needed to order a lot of these milkshake mixers because they were so busy. They were flying through their milkshakes and they needed to up their production. So he was just surprised at the fact that a business was doing well enough to need all these milkshake mixers. And he drove to San Bernardino to check out this restaurant. And while he was there, he was just fascinated with the innovative and efficient way that they served their customers. So he quit his job as a milkshake mixer salesman and wanted to become a business partner with the McDonald brothers. Ultimately, the McDonald brothers and Kroc disagreed on company strategy for how to grow and expand the business. Like I said, the brothers really only wanted to operate a small number of restaurants in California and Arizona, but they did try to license their kitchen operations. They didn't think that their concept would catch on in colder, more rainy climate states because people would have to wait outside at the window to get service and didn't think people would want to get out of their cars for that.
So I assume this was before the invention, I guess, of the drive-thru. They were still walking up.
Yeah, and I think you could get away with car hop style restaurants in bad weather areas because then it's not your guests that you're making uncomfortable, it's your employees. But the idea of the customers getting out of their car to come have to wait in line at a window, they didn't think would catch on the way it does in California and Arizona. Kroc, however, wanted to make the McDonald's brand a national operation. So he became their franchise operator. It was his job to sell franchisees, and he established what he called the McDonald's Corporation. His deal with potential franchisees, future franchisees, was for them to pay a fee of 1.9% of gross sales. They'd pay an initial startup fee to have the restaurant. It was like $950 or something like that. But then they would have to pay 1.9% of their gross sales to the McDonald's Corporation.
Gotcha.
Kroc would pay the McDonald brothers 0.5%. Out of the 1.9, he would pay the brothers 0.5% as like a royalty for using their name and their company, but he kept the rest for his own company.
So hold on, I misread this. So it was 0.5% of the 1.9%?
No, it would be
0.5% of the total.
0.5% of the total revenues of the franchisee.
Okay, that's a little better.
1.4% would go to the McDonald's Corporation, aka Ray Kroc.
I still feel like it's unfair.
The number is really small, but I mean, we'll talk later about like how much that really would be today if the McDonald brothers were still a part of McDonald's. But that's kind of how franchising works, I guess, in the restaurant industry. Yeah. Typically, they would get all of that because they would be doing the franchising themselves. But since Kroc was their quote unquote business partner who established his own corporation to grow the McDonald's brand, he kept a larger chunk of it to help his company. And it was what the McDonald brothers agreed to, that 0.5%. But they had a lot of other restrictions on what he could and couldn't do with the company, which ultimately leads to his wanting to get the brothers out of the company.
Interesting.
Ray Kroc opened and established his first McDonald's restaurant in 1955 in Des Plaines, Illinois, which is just outside of Chicago. That's where he was from.
Okay.
And his franchises grew quickly. It was an easy sell, especially going along with the growth of the American auto industry and the new highway system that was spreading across the country. It was easy to open these restaurants along the highway system so people who were traveling would just have a quick, inexpensive stop for a meal. He did, however, run into issues when he was trying to open franchises in areas where the brothers themselves were opening their own franchises. And Kroc, like I said, he was frustrated because they put a lot of restrictions on what he could and couldn't do with his restaurants. He couldn't change the menu or do things the way that he wanted to run his business. Everything had to be checked in with the brothers, and they were very stubborn guys. They were very proud of their company and didn't want him to change much.
Yeah.
But he thought that franchises were his thing. Like, he agreed to be their franchise operator. He was going to do all the franchises. So when he realized that they were selling franchises away from him, that's taking money out of his company. He wasn't getting his percentage cut. So he was very unhappy running into these issues. And sometimes he would even buy the franchise contract from the franchisee so that he was then operating them instead of the McDonald brothers.
Wow.
Eventually, Kroc just got so fed up with the McDonald brothers that he went to them and said, "How much do I have to pay you to get you out of the company? To give me all the rights to your name and the company itself?" The brothers told him $2.7 million, which was a lot at the time. Kroc didn't have that. He had to find some lending partners to get that. In today's dollars, that'd be $23.7 million, which is a steal for McDonald's and a lot of restaurant chains. But at the time, that was a lot of money. And McDonald's obviously wasn't the company then that it is today.
Right.
They came up with that number because they estimated that after taxes, they would each have their $1 million and achieve their goal of both becoming millionaires.
Okay. They did it.
They did.
More money, more problems, right?
But in doing so, Kroc did gain all the rights to McDonald's. The sale included all the existing locations, the naming rights, everything involved with McDonald's, with the exception of the original location in San Bernardino. Obviously, it didn't include some of the early franchises that McDonald brothers made, but they were all later acquired by the McDonald's Corporation, which was Ray Kroc, or just closed because of competition in business. But the only business he really didn't get that he was upset about was the original one in San Bernardino. The McDonald brothers, now that they've achieved their goal of being millionaires, hope to just retire and leave their original restaurant behind to some of their long-term employees. So that's why they didn't want to sell it to Kroc.
Yeah.
But because Kroc now had the naming rights to McDonald's, the original location had to change its name and rebrand it as the Big M.
Oh, no. That's not a good name. The Big M.
Even this, though, wasn't good enough for Kroc. He was bitter and furious that the brothers prevented him from running the business his way. So he opened a new corporate McDonald's only a block away from the Big M.
My God.
The competition was just too much for the original location. They tried to operate with declining sales for about 6 years, but eventually the Big M closed.
He's a jerk.
He's a savage businessman.
I mean, yeah, but you'd think he'd, like, give it a rest. Like, you got the whole company.
Well, as kind of a testament to his attitude, Kroc wrote an autobiography in the 1970s called Grinding It Out, The Making of McDonald's. And within this book, he first referred to himself as the founder of McDonald's. He also considered his first location, the one in Des Plaines, Illinois, as the birthplace of McDonald's.
What?
And today that restaurant
my
is celebrated as McDonald's restaurant number 1.
This makes me so angry. I don't like Ray Kroc.
In a 1991 interview with the Wall Street Journal, Dick McDonald said, "Up until the time we were sold, there was no mention of Kroc being the founder. If we had heard about it, he would be back selling milkshake machines."
Yeah, should have kept him at bay.
McDonald's still celebrates an annual Founders Day on April 15th, which was originally set up to honor Kroc because he was quote-unquote the founder. And the brothers weren't given any recognition for their role as having founded the company until 1991, 7 years after Ray Kroc had passed.
That's so rude.
Kind of an arrogant guy.
It's super arrogant.
Good businessman, knew what he was doing,
And
but
shrewd. Like, shameless. Jeez.
after they sold out of the company, both Dick and Mac eventually got married and became stepfathers. Neither one of them had their own biological children, but they do have grandchildren and distant relatives today from their marriages. Mac never forgave Ray Kroc for the way things ended and the way he kind of took their company from them and then changed it from what they set it up to be.
Yeah.
Mac had a lot of resentment, and he eventually passed away from a heart attack in 1971 at age 69. That was years before the brothers received any recognition for their role in founding the company. Dick moved back to New Hampshire after they sold out, and he eventually came to terms with what became of their company. He kind of watched the way the resentment destroyed Mac up until his passing and didn't want that kind of bitterness for himself.
Yeah.
Dick never really seemed to mind that they missed out on the McDonald's fortune. And like I said, that 0.5% royalty that they had based on McDonald's sales today would be well over $300 million.
Jeez.
Which is quite a bit more than the 2.7 they sold the company for. Obviously, that's over time, but if they were in the company, and it would be very different. Their lives would have been very different. But Dick sort of said that it didn't really matter to him that they weren't a part of that. He said, quote, "I would have wound up in some skyscraper somewhere with about 4 ulcers and 8 tax attorneys trying to figure out how to pay all my income tax."
I mean, I guess that's, I don't know, a reasonable point, but I don't know if it's an argument against having
Positive way to look at it. Silver lining.
Yeah.
After Kroc passed away, the McDonald's Corporation finally reached out to Dick to properly credit the brothers for their role in the company.
Oh, that's good. Good on you, McDonald's.
A McDonald's spokesman named Chuck Eberling said in 1984, "We mutually agreed that Dick and Mac were the pioneers of McDonald's and helped to found the fast food industry. Mr. Kroc was the entrepreneur who founded what today is known as McDonald's Corporation." So it really wasn't the restaurant itself, but instead their speedy service system, which was the brothers' notable contribution, and the way that they really revolutionized the fast food industry. Dick passed away in 1998 at the age of 89, back in his hometown of Manchester, New Hampshire. And like we mentioned, the two brothers were actually portrayed in a movie a couple years ago called The Founder. They were played by John Carroll Lynch, who played Mac, and Nick Offerman, who played Dick. But the movie itself is really more centered around Ray Kroc's story. It's more of a biography about him.
I remember it coming up.
I saw the movie and I really enjoyed it. It's a good movie. You kind of see both sides of Ray Kroc, whether he's the smart business guy or the just kind of ruthless, needs to have it his way and cuts them out of his company type thing. But I didn't realize that Nick Offerman was Dick. So then, like, you watch Parks and Rec, and it's Ron Swanson, and then you go back and watch this, and you're like, whoa. Very different, because he's, like, clean-shaven with short hair and very, like...
Oh, my God. Now I have to watch
not
it.
Ron Swanson. Yeah, it was funny.
That's great. I'm glad you said that, because I knew I recognized the name Nick Offerman, but I was racking my brain who it was, so you solved it for me.
There's an interview with the grandson of Dick McDonald who talks about the movie itself, and he says that John Carroll Lynch and Nick Offerman do a pretty good job of portraying the brothers, at least sort of accurately.
Yeah.
The whole New England style business guys who moved out to California to open or find success and open a business.
Right.
I guess it is a fairly accurate movie in most parts of it. Obviously, there's some things that are modified for the big screen, but worth checking out if you want to know more about the founding of McDonald's and the Ray Kroc story.
Cool. The founder. All right. Are you ready for your quiz? I think it'll be a little bit easier this week.
So you're not going to ask me to name like everything on the McDonald's menu?
That's question number 1.
Darn it. I'm going to look it up during the break.
I want to know the songwriter of the ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
What's that?
I'm kidding. That's not a question. That's their, I don't know, little commercial jingle.
I know. I'm just kidding.
Dear God. All right. Well, we'll be back in just a second.
Science is the tool we can use to explain everything in our world. But sometimes the information's delivered in a way that's hard to understand, misleading, or fake. Join me at the Science Night podcast as I talk with different scientists about their work. In a fun way. Find it wherever you get your podcasts or at scinight.com.
All right, welcome back. As you know, we like to end every episode with a short 3-question quiz for our host, just to test them out and see what they learned, and also to give our listeners a chance to test their own knowledge. So today we're going to do some McDonald's trivia for Phil. The first question, the McDonald's franchises span the globe, but the largest location is located in what city? It is in the U.S. I'll narrow it down for you.
Do I get multiple choice on this?
I can give you multiple choice.
I don't know.
I probably should. All right. I got to think of some cities now. L.A. We'll go with L.A., Chicago, Orlando, New York.
My initial thought was Times Square, but that's probably not right. So I'm going to say Orlando because that was like the odd one in that.
Yeah, I was thinking that. That was like a horrible choice of answers. I should have come up with those ahead of time.
That was unfair of me to ask for multiple choice.
No, it's all good. It was like the 3 biggest cities and then Orlando.
Name cities: New York, Chicago, LA, and Youngstown, Ohio.
All right, so you got it. So this location is 19,000 square feet and has a 30-foot tall Ronald McDonald, just in case there's anybody out there who's terrified of clowns.
The one by us is pretty big. Not by us, but like in, what is that, Niles? Or
Yeah.
Howland? Right by the Cavelli corporate
Yes.
office, because my former employer, well, Panera franchisee, used to be the biggest McDonald's franchisee and still owns and operates that big McDonald's right by their office.
Yeah, it is pretty big. Speaking of Ronald McDonald,
Oh, gosh.
what radio personality and Today Show weather personality first played Ronald McDonald?
I mean, Al Roker, right? No?
No.
Is there another Today Show weather personality?
Well, he's not currently the Today Show
Oh, I
personality.
guess first played Ronald McDonald wouldn't have been Al Roker, but I don't know any other Today Show.
It was in
Weatherman.
1963.
Yeah. Never mind. I'm dumb. I don't know.
Don't talk to yourself like that. Willard Scott, who also
What?
played Bozo the Clown.
Who was Willard Scott?
You don't know who Willard Scott is?
Do you?
Yeah.
He played Bozo the
I
Clown.
mean, he was on the he might still be on the Today Show. I don't know if he's still there, but I believe he immediately preceded Al Roker.
Oh, I mean,
I thought that one would be easier.
Didn't
than it
really
was.
think Al Roker would have been Ronald McDonald, but I don't know any other Today Show weathermen.
That would have been awesome. Al
I was
Roker
like,
is Ronald
did
McDonald.
he just voice him? Because he clearly doesn't look like him.
All right. For your final question, another multiple choice. This one pre-prepared. What is the minimum amount required of non-borrowed personal resources to be considered for a franchise? $100,000, $250,000, $500,000, or $1 million?
Wait,
This is
can
from
you
the
say that
company.
again?
This is from the company website. So to become a franchisee, McDonald's requires a minimum of how much of non-borrowed personal resources?
500,000.
Good call. Good guess.
Ah,
That's correct.
that's a lot of cash on hand.
Yeah.
But
It says, then this is a direct quote. Since the total cost varies from restaurant to restaurant, the minimum amount for a down payment will vary, but generally we require a minimum of $500,000 of non-borrowed personal resources to consider you for a franchise. So I feel like we're a long way off.
we should have had McDonald's sponsor this episode.
I'm actually surprised it's that much. Like, I would have expected it to be cheaper.
You know, I've heard that like Chick-fil-A is really cheap to open a franchise.
Yeah.
I think it's only like $30,000 or something. No, that can't be right. Whatever it is, I think it's fairly cheap, but they require a lot out of their franchisees. Like
Yeah.
you have to work X number of hours and commit to all this different stuff. But heck, the Chick-fil-A by us at least is always crazy busy. So maybe we should get into
it's
that.
packed constantly. It says on their website, while operating a Chick-fil-A restaurant requires a relatively modest $10,000 initial
$10,000.
financial commitment.
I was going to say that, and I was like, it can't be that low.
Well, yeah, that surprises me about McDonald's because I feel like, I mean, you'd want to make it as, I don't know, as accessible as possible so more people would open franchises. But how many people are walking around with a spare $500,000?
I wonder if that's just for a single restaurant or for like a chain.
Yeah, I don't know. But
I mean, if
it
you look
kinda
into
blew
like
my mind.
Ray Kroc, I didn't want to talk about him too much this episode because it's not about him, but he was crazy about the franchisees being invested in the business. Like that's why
Yeah.
they were able to be so successful and grow the brand, because he really was like right for the job of growing McDonald's.
Mm-hmm.
But he obviously just didn't get along with the McDonald brothers very well.
Yeah, definitely not. And didn't care to give them their glory either.
No. All right. Well, thanks for listening to the Inventors of Fast Food. Join us next week for more History's B-Side.
History's B-Side is an independent, listener-supported podcast.
Leave us a review or subscribe to the show on your favorite podcasting service. And follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at History's B-Side.
Send us your feedback or inquire about sponsorship and advertising opportunities by emailing us at historiesbside@gmail.com.
You can donate to the show at buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside. While you're there, check out our membership perks, merchandise, and more.
This episode was researched and produced by your hosts, Matt Melito
And Phil Hall. Thanks for listening to History's B-Side.